looking at the requirement now to deliver floor plans by the 23rd of January, which what we've been approached by a few of the housing associations looking at how best to achieve that. So we've been doing a bit of research into the different ways that different people are doing it. And we had a group of housing association, and Kelly was part of that a few weeks ago, where we looked at the different ways that people were tackling it. And Jack, Ed Costa was on that call as well. So he was explaining to us the method that he's approaching. And it is quite interesting because different people are following a different methodology, which is good, I think. But it's probably a good idea to coordinate some of those things as well, so that we can achieve. One of the concerns that I've got is that we deliver just what's needed for the 23rd of January, which is the basic floor plan, which doesn't include any detail about what rooms are in each apartment. It's just basically saying that there's an apartment there, which may satisfy the immediate need of the fire brigade for the premises information box, but it's not going to satisfy what we need going forward for either the safety case or the probably things like carbon and all those other things that are rolling down the track, as it were. So what I think's useful to do is to try and agree a specification of what those different levels are, and what we've tried to do with that is to create those as from the conversations that we've had, create maybe a bronze, silver and gold standard, as it were, or specification, so that if people obviously at the moment are focused on just getting the plans that are needed, then we could those can be procured and specified, or specified and procured, but that the information can then be added to, because for example, one of the conversations that we've had is with Gerda. So Gerda, that do the premises information boxes, they provide a service that some of the members have been using to actually create the floor plans, and those are very clean, simple floor plans, but they're produced in Visio and then provided as PDFs. So if anybody wants to add to that information, it's quite difficult to do. It has to go back to Gerda to do it. So the workflow probably needs to be a little bit more flexible than that. It's great if Gerda have got that service, if people want to commission them to actually do that. But I think it's important that the information is then can be built upon. So that's the methodology that we're following with that. Is everybody aware of what the requirements are as far as the premises information box and the let me just check out. I included it in the email that I sent out. Give me a second. Just so we're on the same page. So this is the requirement that needs to be delivered by 23rd of January. And they've basically referenced this document here, which is the code of practice, and going through this, this is the sort of information that they're looking for, the fire brigades are looking for. And I believe these have been produced. So there, for example, you've got a sectional view, and importantly, probably a sectional view of the individual units. And then we've then got simple plans, which are just at this base level of information here, that incorporate some of the key elements, for example, dry risers and the like. And then moving on from there, what they're also saying is that they want to have this highlighted where there's people at risk. So if you like, that's what they're trying to have as a standard data set that can then be built on. Now, I think that's fine, but what I think we need to then do is make it so that when, for example, we want to collect the information about what wall type it is, you know, what is the compartment, that can then be
George,
added.
can you stop sharing? I can see my own face, and I don't want to.
I apologize. Sorry. So anyway, does anybody have any comments or observations on that? Kelly's going to give us an overview of what Orbit are doing shortly. So she's going to walk through that, which is they're taking a position. I don't want to steal her thunder, but what they're doing is they're having they're going from the aspect of creating a comprehensive model, and then deriving from that the information that is going to be needed for different purposes, which I think is a sensible way of doing it if you've got the capacity to do it, and financial capacity as well. Whereas other people that have got maybe 100 or 200 blocks, that's actually quite difficult to do, you know, to fund. So we need to probably have a way of looking at this that is progressive, that maybe can start with, there's perhaps a methodology that we adopt where you've got maybe remediation taking place on a building, so therefore there's value in doing a detailed model. At the other end, there's just a matter of having something pretty basic that's just a placeholder that we can add enough information that just satisfies what the fire brigade need. So that was really my thought. But I'll throw it open to question now. Just realised my camera's not on. Does anybody have any comments? Cool. Okay. So around the table, how are people pursuing it at the moment? Patrick, if I can pick on you for the moment?
Yeah, that's fine. We're doing probably what you suggested against doing, which is employing Gerda. We've been in contract with Gerda with floor plans and such for several years. So obviously we've got a long established relationship with them about maintaining that. So they have they've recently updated to include the other elevations they didn't have on their basic plans historically. Yeah. So we're in the process of purchasing those plans. To be honest, going and looking at creating building models for our stock is not really feasible at the current time anyway. There's no appetite to do so, but that doesn't, you know, longer term, that I suppose is still on the table. We haven't yet completely outlined how our golden thread of information for our occupied buildings is going to work yet. So obviously there's quite a lot of investment in our new build program on that, and we'll probably roll out a load of lessons learned and into our existing stock over the next 12 months or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we're going. We're going for the, I suppose, basic approach review that, informing our building safety cases and the conversations we're having around the safety cases. You're not really going to get away from going that, the system is not going to really escape going down to site and testing the safety case to ensure it's working. So, having a basic system that works, I think, will be just as powerful as having a platform that works, that maybe operationally cannot be accessed on the ground and demonstrate to HSE during their audit process. So we're taking that's our approach currently.
Yeah, just to clarify, Patrick, I wasn't suggesting in any way that you should use Gerda.
Yeah, no. I
or-
was being facetious maybe a little bit with some of my comments, but yeah, that's sort of how we're approaching in the immediate future anyway.
Yeah, I'm speaking to Gerda, and what I'm suggesting is that what they produce, they can produce it in a machine readable format. It's just at the moment they're choosing not to, because they perceive that is something that obviously is a financial side for them. And the point I've made to them is that there's a much bigger market for them if they can be part of the wider ecosystem. And if they're producing things that nobody else can add to, then that becomes it's a blocker really.
Yeah, I mean, Gerda tends to be that's their approach to most things, kind of hold their position until enough clients come back and lobby them to do something about it.
Yeah.
We've found that about most things we've engaged with Gerda at over the last decade. So yeah, no doubt they'll probably that will be the direction of travel eventually, but they probably need several of their big clients to tell them that's the direction of travel and that's what they need before they'll probably look at doing it.
Yeah, and I guess that's the purpose of this really, to basically say, well, for example, when you get the plans back, would you want to be able to add to the information what type of door it is, for example? I think you probably would.
Yeah. The fact you picked up on the building fabric is one that, yeah, we've got a number of question marks about buildings, which I'm sure a lot of people do. Not that we'd probably want to put on a plan to give to the LFB at this stage, because we're still carrying out investigations, and yeah, that information will need to be updated periodically as we carry out our investigation program. So I definitely agree there's a need to update stuff on those plans moving forward.
Okay. Anybody else? Steve, what are you doing? How are you dealing with it?
Yeah, sorry, I jumped on a little late there, so I'm hoping I'm going to answer the right question correctly. Basically, we've got basic plans. So from other things like structural surveys, we've got basic plans, and we had girder PIB boxes in all of our tall buildings in advance of this. So it's really just, we're now auditing to see what's the gap analysis between what we've got and what they now want, or what guidance is now saying we have to have for January. We've got quite a small portfolio of 18 metre plus 7 story plus buildings. However, we've got an eye on what we're buying from development and how information comes in, and we're trying to educate not just development, but everyone in the business. So we're doing some internal CPD sessions to really say, okay, golden thread's a reality, digitization of information coming in. When we buy stuff, we need to buy units, or when we develop stuff, we need to develop units in a way that's going to be serviceable and compliant, not just from the building, but from the information and safety case, golden thread, all of that is going to have to work for us. So we're kind of trying to guard the front door on that to make sure everything comes in the right formats as we develop and as we acquire. And then retrospectively, our big issues, we've got a lot of stock, 11 to 17 meters, a lot. So that is where our big challenges are going to hit us. We should be able to handle our portfolio. We've got, I think it's 8 buildings. We should be able to handle that, and use those as almost the pilots for what we're going to do across the rest of the business as legislation hits us and things progress forward.
That's good, thank you. I mean, one of the things that I'm finding from talking to people is there's something I wasn't aware of, that one of the housing associations was telling me yesterday, that they've had to do something on leaseholder protection. Is it the Leaseholder Protection Act or something like that? So that means that they've had to collect a whole lot of information about, I think, buildings that are over 5 stories or something like that. So it's actually below the safety case one, but it's, I don't know if I guess what I'm saying is that it seems that you've got quite a lot of different pressures that are demands that are coming from, you know, from different areas. And I saw also yesterday, or I think it was on Monday actually, it was about new the new provisions within NEC3, or sorry, NEC4, for developers and contractors to demonstrate that they've taken due account of carbon, and if they don't, they get penalised for that as well. So it seems to me that you've got so many different plates spinning. It's very challenging to actually address them all.
Yeah, we've got a massive PAS 9980 program running across a load of lower rise blocks, just to understand more about how it's built.
That's interesting. Jack, what's your position at the moment? Ed told us what he was doing on the fire side, but
Yeah, so I guess, as you say, there are quite a few things coming in under the fire safety regulations, and we probably want to be in a good position when they come in. But I think some of it, certainly say around fire door checks, we'll probably be happy enough having started out on our work and having a plan to demonstrate when we will meet that by, rather than necessarily meeting it on the 23rd of January. But for the floor plans, so Ed is a colleague of mine, and they have got an app that they will be creating very basic floor plans from. But my team will be continuing to scan buildings and create 3D models from them, looking at that kind of golden thread part and not diverting our resource into purely creating kind of not half-baked plans, but plans that wouldn't allow us to do the full work that we want to do on site. You know, scanning the whole building would probably just do communal areas if we were coming up with it, and then we've got to go back out again. So we'll be kind of splitting the work a bit on it, in terms of part of the team doing work to create the basic floor plans, and we'll be continuing on with that golden thread work.
where are you on that journey, Jack? Because I know you've got hundreds of buildings, haven't you?
We've got about 80 HRBs.
Oh, is that right? Okay, it's fewer
yeah.
than I thought. Yeah.
We've got more that we have an interest in, but where we are the responsible person. So we've scanned and modelled about just over 20 of those.
Oh, have you? Right, okay. I'd be very interested, if you wouldn't mind, if you could give me, if you could let me see how you got, where you've got to with that, if you'd be willing to do
absolutely.
that.
Oh, and that goes out to anyone. We're always happy to share what we're doing if anyone wants to see. You know, we don't want to all be working in isolation here, and some people might have some great pointers to say, why on earth are you doing that? Or you pick up information for yourself. So, you know, consider that a kind of invitation to anyone. I've spoken to Kelly before, and Dave and others. So if anyone does want to kind of see what we're doing, then always happy to share.
Thank you. I'm just going around the table, as it were, if I may. Nick, what's your experience?
probably relatively lucky. We've only got 4 high-rise blocks, 2 of which are brand new builds. So obviously we've plenty of development plans there that we can, you know, take single line drawings to put into the PIBs, etc. The other 2, I've asked the local fire and safety assessor actually to make some local arrangements, whether he does something himself or whether he gets a local architect, because all I plan to do at the moment, and until we get any greater guidance, is just to simply follow the guidance document that you just showed there. And I apologise, I've got a colleague working just close behind me as well. Is follow the guidance that you showed there, which is fairly simplistic, isn't it? And nothing too technically challenging. For the hard copy, and then wait and see what comes out for electronic transfer, and you know, do what we need to do then for electronic transfer. What we actually end up with, I don't know. I suspect it will be PDF. How we get there, maybe. You know, we'll have to wait and see. But as I say, I've actually put it into the hands of the local fire and safety assessor down for we have 2 blocks in Aldershot right opposite each other. And they're the only 2 really that, you know, that we haven't got existing floor plans for. So whether he gets his scale rule and a pencil out, or something a bit more sophisticated, I'll wait and see.
Thank you. And Lee, where are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So yeah, I've only attended a couple of these meetings, George, and we've been looking at floor plans for a couple of years because I've been running a couple of programs with BAYS about heat transfer coefficients of smaller homes. So as part of that project, we pulled in a lot of floor plans, and we armed our maintenance technicians with laser measures and an iPhone app, which when they go into a property, be it for any reason, that they actually capture that information. And then we kind of tag it to an archetype if there's a number of homes or buildings like that. More recently, I've done a 14-story building. We're quite lucky, actually. We've only got 1 building which is impacted by the building safety bill. But we've modelled that in an application called SiteDesk, a company that I've been speaking to over a number of years. So I'm quite happy to share what we've been doing over the time. The guys in our assets department are using that information that we've pulled together in the past and some of the newly modelled information to deliver the documentation required for that building safety case. But by no means kind of finished or anything yet, and I really would be interested to take some pointers from you guys of where you're up to in these cases.
Yeah, SiteDesk is interesting. That's Matthew, isn't it? Matthew Cunliffe.
Yes,
so
yes, that's right.
I know Matthew, good guy. Yeah, that's helpful. In terms of those fire plans, the other thing that has become clear to me is that we've not only got different pressures, we've also got different regulators or different people that are asking for this information. So the fire side of things is under the Home Office, as I understand it, whereas the Building Safety Act and building control, they're under the HSE now. So the requirement for the 23rd of January, is that only for high risk buildings? Is it only for the in-scope buildings? Or is it for?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
So for things like the fire door checks, that's
all, obviously, yeah.
Well, 11 plus. But then for the floor plans, that's HRBs.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Dave, I've not left you out. It's just I obviously talk to you anyway. But so, what's your current progress with these?
Yeah, I was going to say no different than what everyone else has said, to be honest with you. We've got about 3 or 4 new builds which we've got plans for, so we've sort of sorted those out. And the historical ones at the moment, we've got a guy going out and doing those plans for us. Our surveyors were already doing plans for units using an app, so we've just expanded out for the other 19 buildings that we've got to get full floor plans done on those for the PIBs. Interesting, and one thing I was going to mention, is, I don't know if everyone was has had sight of or was aware that the new BS 8644 turned up last week. Yeah, everyone's nodding.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to explain a little bit about that later, but carry on, Dave, please.
So that's yet another gap analysis I'm doing.
Yeah, well, we can probably help with that. Yeah, in fact, I'll explain a little bit about that later. But yeah, so have I missed anybody out? I don't think I have. Fleur, sorry. Yeah, well, you and I spoke
okay.
last week, didn't we? So,
we did.
yeah.
I mean, we have nearly 100 HRBs, and so ultimately we're keen just to hit the January deadline and focus entirely on that requirement really initially. Actually, in terms of floor plans, our records aren't dreadful across the portfolio. So we do have plans which include floor layouts and flat layouts and all of that type of thing. But actually what's sort of harder to come by is the more specific fire equipment and the specific guidance for the PIB. So I think we're trying to deal with those two things separately, because trying to deal with 100 buildings to get comprehensive floor plans by January is probably a little ambitious. I think Girder is certainly one of our ideas that we're exploring, but I think we're looking at a number of different providers at the moment, trying to hit that out really in terms of meeting our requirements. My main focus is actually on new builds coming into the portfolio, so trying to make sure that we've got all of that information in an accessible format as possible, and making sure that RERs set out those requirements very clearly, and where it's not covered under our existing contractual arrangements, to make sure that our fire guardians are supporting us in delivering those requirements, and that we've got the plans and the PIB boxes in place already on those new schemes before we accept handover. So
thank you. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're doing with this, we basically we've set up a little work stream, another little work stream, just to look at this floor plan exercise, because actually it's our work streams only run for a few months. That's the whole idea of them, really. You've got a particular problem. Let's see if we can address it. One of the things that we're trying to do is, through the work stream, is get from people what the requirements are, so that we can actually agree a consistent set of requirements, and then provide that to maybe survey firms and the like, so that they've got a clear brief. And because one of the things that does sort of concern me is the people just go out and buy a Matterport scanner, and without really having there might be good surveyors, but they might not have all of the knowledge that they need to be able to produce a really good output from that. So what we're doing is we're speaking with both some of the big providers, people like Plum and Craven and Murphy's and Platinum and Multivista and people like that, so that we can agree what information they need to be able to put together a clear offer, but also agree what the quality of the information needs to be, so that we're not just ending up in a situation where we get back information that then isn't then properly reusable. So that's what we're trying to do over the next few weeks. So if anybody's interested in participating in that, then that would be good. And if I really welcome, Jack, if I can see where you've got to, because you've been pioneering this. Talking about pioneering, Kelly, would you be able to give us a run through of the approach that Orbit's been taking? James Banner showed us something on this probably about 18 months ago, I think. So that was the starting point. But since then, Kelly and also Neil Yeomans, you've actually run an initial pilot. You've got a plan in place, haven't you?
Yeah, so we took one of our estates where we've got 3 18-metre buildings on there, and we decided to do very similar to what Jack's doing, but we've scanned the whole site and looked at everything that's on that site. I've got a very short presentation. It was an internal presentation because obviously we've had to go around the business to show what we've done. And I don't have a lot of the modelling information at the minute, but I'll kind of just quickly run through what we did and what our approach was.
Thank you.
I'll skip that first bit because obviously you all know what the golden thread is. A lot of people in our business don't yet. So this was the BIM briefing document. So our plan is to retro BIM all of our buildings to understand them from a point of view of knowing what they are, what they're made up from, what they look like, because some of these are very, very old buildings and we don't have, and they were stock transfer, so we don't have a lot of information on them. Then obviously that will go into building up drawings, plans, and anything that we need, because obviously once it's within a modelling, we can, you know, pretty much provide everything that we want. So we did that by the laser scanning, which was done through drones on the outside, all of the different types of scanning on the inside. We went into every part of the building, apart from where we had the flat. So we did example flats. So we tried to capture kind of every other floor. We managed to get in and scan the flat. So we kind of know what the whole building looks like. We did utility surveys to see how the site interconnected with each other. And we also added in thermal drone scanning as well. So yes, we've got EPCs, but we wanted to have a look at where these buildings are clad, older kind of pebble dash cladding. We wanted to understand kind of where the heat losses were coming from them to be able to inform us of how we're going to manage the buildings in the future. Intrusively, we did core sampling of all of the structure. So we drilled through the structure of the walls, floors, ceilings, pretty basement. Obviously, we couldn't do the foundations, but everything else we drilled into it, went off site for lab testing so that we could really see how the internal and external walls were built up. So we fully understand the compartmentation, the structure, the cavity barriers and all of that. We did that within the flats as well. So we did probably 4 to 5 flats in each building. We drilled through all of their walls, floors and ceilings. We did have some very, you know, happy customers to let us do that, which we were really thankful for. So again, we've got lots and lots of data on that. Again, we did the energy assessments, the heat stuff. We did intensive fire safety inspections, which obviously worked in conjunction with having done all of the intrusive works. And then the outcome of that is we will look at what the options will be on these types of buildings for the future. The research side of it and the consultancy, we're now building up a picture, obviously looking at different ways to manage the asset of information, how we can hold all of that. So we've looked at all the different standards to kind of understand what we want to do and where we want to be. So this is just some initial findings. I thought it'd be quite interesting to show by doing this particular work. So this is at the top, this is one of the 3 buildings. They're all very identical from the outside, slight differences around accessing into the buildings and basements and stuff. Strangely enough, we didn't know that this area here was actually an extension to the building. So there was no records to show that a 18 metre plus building had a major extension, which has led to additional works that we've had to do around the structure to make sure it's all tied in properly. So we've got to go back and do some additional stuff on that. The pebble dashing also, we found out that over time that was added separately. And we've also had some structural strengthening on the building past, was it called Ronan Point, when there was the collapse of one of the tower blocks there, where the buildings had to be reinforced at the floor levels. So we know we've had all that done as well. So that was a major benefit of understanding the buildings. Obviously, that's just an example of the kind of information that we're getting through and that we can see these drawings here. So we can do them in, you know, 3D, we can kind of have the flat plans, 2D plans, we can put whatever it is we want in there. So we've built up what the whole building looks like. Obviously just spoke about the building change. Fire risk assessments, that was very, very interesting because obviously we've all got the fire risk assessments, but actually by using an understanding the building had had an extension, what that looked like, and also understanding the external walls a little bit better, we were able to kind of do a little bit more in-depth fire risk checking. So we've also found within the extension, which we're assuming was put in for a second lift, there's potentially open steel beams at each floor that wouldn't have been fire protected. So we've got to go back now and further have a look at those beams to see, you know, what we need to do and, you know, how much of it is in that area. And unfortunately, that's a case of pulling ceilings down now and actually getting up there. But we wouldn't have known any of this without actually doing this piece of work. Now, the heat mapping was a really interesting thing because obviously from the golden thread point of view and understanding structure and fire safety, you kind of think about it as it's not a particular impact, but actually this was really beneficial to not only our teams that are looking at, you know, the net carbon and all of that stuff, they're looking at all of that data, but it prompted us to think of the building as a whole, as we should be thinking about it now, and actually the impacts of it. So we assess, as part of this project, we assess all of our property improvement works for the future so that we can see what it is that they want to do to these buildings and what the requirement changes are and how that needs to be managed. But an interesting one is they wanted to replace all the windows. And really, you can't do that in isolation anymore on these buildings because the pebble dash was overlaid over the top of the windows, so around the frame. So you're going to damage the external wall. You've got to go for building control consent because the window types will slightly change on these types of buildings. So then you've got to retro put in cavity barriers, which we found we didn't have around any of these windows. And then when we did the heat loss stuff, we found that actually, yes, the windows at the end of their useful life, but the heat loss is coming from the external wall. So it doesn't matter how many windows and, you know, the balcony areas we replace, we'll probably cause more of a problem to the building by doing that because we will create those cold spots and those heat spots in different locations. So this building does have a slight problem with damp and mould, and that the windows was the idea that our improvement teams had for replacement to fix that, but it'll cause more problems. So now we're waiting for a varied kind of listing of what we could do to this building to be able to think of it as one particular structure and what we need to do and how much it's going to cost us to not just tackle the windows, but, you know, tackle the balconies, tackle the external wall, what the heating systems need to look like inside to be able to, you know, support the warmth within the building and, you know, to keep it going a lot longer. So that's a piece of work that's been prompted on the back of this. Interestingly as well, and something that particularly annoys me is the amount of redundant equipment that we have in these types of buildings where, you know, contractors can be genuinely lazy. Replace stuff, leave wiring in, you know, that is not around maintaining your golden thread and understanding your building. So we've now got drawings to show where redundant equipment is, and we'll be stripping all of that out and kind of making it good. So we're going to have some really good plans around you know, the specific equipment, what it is, where it's located and what it does, instead of on these plans having junction boxes, bits of old kit for old door entry systems, lots of electrical stuff that you've got to put on there because it's mapped in the building, but actually it's not usable. So it's all got to go. This is just kind of showing you examples of what it is. As you can see, the bits that we pulled out of the floor, how they did the particular works into the building. So the modeling's still under construction. We've got the initial modelling. We're kind of building up now the picture of what we want to see for the modelling. We've gone for the really highest level of modelling. So, you know, it looks like the building looks. And yesterday actually was a day that I was working with the external guys who have done this to build up the asset information, what it is we want to see. As a business, we're very interested in adopting HACT. Obviously, we know that the standards haven't been fully defined at the minute, so we want to have that flexible journey on our asset information so that as those kind of items and attributes and assets, I know everybody calls them differently, are defined by those working groups, we will adopt those. But for the meantime, we're kind of building up what our picture of asset information looks like to meet the golden thread. Obviously, this was an internal one. So ActiveH is our database management system. So we're also doing comparisons, obviously, against that system and how we can hold the data in the system that we've just been provided. We know we also cannot get all of this information and the management of the modelling in our current systems. So we're just looking at the external common data environment platforms to be able to manage this longer term. So accessibility for our contractors, our staff, customers, fire service, the HSE, it'll be a combined common data environment that we want to do everything. The modelling will hold in there, it will API into our system, so we'll still have that one source of truth. So the information will be led and updated from our database systems that will update the common data environment. Where we don't have the information sat in our database system, that one source of truth will sit in the common data environment. But there is only going to be, in effect, one place where all of our information will sit. And we're just now building up what that common data environment will look like and what the workflows will be and how we want that to be a continuous updating. Because obviously we're not going to be updating the model unless you've got major structural changes. We just want to work out how we'll be updating the asset information in the background. We are creating what we're calling our golden thread management plan. So we know that the golden thread's more than just data. It's everything. It's your interactions internally with different departments. And we're just defining in a management plan what we believe our golden thread will look like. So data, obviously, major point of it. That will be things like the floor plans, the PIB boxes, what that looks like, how they'll be updated, who will manage those, the inspections of that sort of thing. It will be defining the inspections and how we'll manage to look at all of our fire door information. But then it will also be the interactions with the departments. So the impacts, anybody that has an impact on that building across our business will be in that golden thread management plan. Just give you some real little examples, like we've got a new team that manages aids and adaptations. We've got a lot of elderly people that are living in these tower blocks, particular customers that I've been and spoken to who are like, no, I'm always going to live here. I love it. But actually, I need some work doing. I need some adaptations doing. So we will have those kinds of information on how we'll be updating that. Like customer improvements, that will be part of our golden thread management plan. Lettings, so the information we provide to the customers when they move into these buildings, we can give them access to portals, showing them what it is, showing them certain drawings, plans, escape routes. That's what we're looking to do, and obviously the updating of it. You don't particularly need to this, again, this is our internal. We're working with Chris Lees to go through these comparisons with our external provider. And our next step for our PIB boxes is we will create from this, we will create from the pilot project that we've done a kind of a suite of all of the drawings to meet all of the requirements out of the back of the modelling, because we'll have that information. And that will kind of be our utopia moving forward as we do all the other blocks. Obviously, for the minute, we've got basic floor plans for everything, so we're quite comfortable we've got that, but we will update those as we kind of define this is what we would expect to see. And the element that we're working on for that at the moment is looking at the disability side of things and how we capture that data, how we show that data, and how we communicate with our customers, how we keep that updated, and how we can show that in a really good physical drawing sliced of the images. I mean, our idea is from those drawings and the sliced drawings, instead of just having kind of like the dots of different colours, actually having people in there. So we'll be looking at GDPR to see if we can have links to people to show a little bit more information. Not sure if we can do it, but we're just kind of looking at all different ways. But once you've got the modelling, in effect, you can do anything. And we know it's a costly process, but in the long run, we just feel that once we get the management and the updating in place, then, you know, that is beneficial to be able to do it for us. Thanks.
That's brilliant, Kelly. Could I just ask, from your experience, what would you flag up that you might do differently, looking back?
Yeah, I'm just looking at that at the moment. I'm not sure if there was anything that I would do particularly differently. I think what was interesting was to actually look at and speak to people to say, what could we do that's more than just what we've done? So, you know, the heat scanning stuff was a really interesting thing that actually gave us results we didn't expect to see. Is there anything else while we're on site that we can do, that we can capture, that might be of a benefit, particularly for the wider organisation? We're now looking to involve lots more people from around the organisation. So, you know, what would benefit you to know about this building? An interesting one was our estate services team, because once you've mapped and planned the estate, the way that they produce their tenders is on size of grass and things like that. We've actually going to have a streamlined process for some of these to be able to provide them data that will drop straight into tenders. They don't have to measure stuff, but everything's already done for you. So that's the kind of thing that we're going to look at a little bit more. But there's nothing I wouldn't do again. Everything was beneficial. And I will say that the communication and consultation with customers was really worthwhile. I mean, we knocked on every door, we spoke to every customer, we went through it with them, and we will be presenting to them our findings as well. As a, you know, there's some things we won't present, obviously, but once we know now what we're going to do with those buildings, are we going to fully renovate them? Are we going to knock them down? What are we going to do with these buildings? We have now got the information to show them that supports those decisions. So we'll be going back out and speaking to customers about it.
Brilliant. Okay, Patrick.
Yeah, sorry, in fact, I suppose for each organisation, we have to, I suppose, look at our means to do sort of a cost versus benefit analysis, and that obviously worked out for you guys. Are you guys able to kind of share sort of cost information about how much this costs you, or is that kind of being kept
approximately
40,000
a block?
Okay.
So yeah, approximately 40,000 a block.
How many blocks did you guys take on?
Yeah, currently 23.
Okay.
But you may have seen that we're merging with Swan Housing, so we're going to have another 50 something, and we'll do all of them because that'll be our decision to do everything. So okay.
Yeah, it's not as much as I thought it was actually. I thought it would be,
it's really not. It's really not. Yeah, actually, trying to get wayfinding signage installed how I want it to be installed is more expensive than doing this, which absolutely gobsmacked me. It's signage. I mean, seriously. So yeah, actually, it is really value for money. And I will say as well, the thing that you're doing at the beginning, because it's a pilot project, you're building up your organizational requirements, your asset requirements at the beginning. You're never going to have to do that again. So I've been working on this for 6 months. That element of it, we've got that document for Evan and Moore for our development teams. For everything else, we've got that for our new systems that we're going to be building. That's our requirements. This is what we want it to do. So it's been hard work, long work getting to this point. But half of that I'll never have to do again. I've got it. We've defined it. It's done. That's what we want. And the benefit of adopting something like UK housing data standards for the asset information is you've got professionals from all around every area that's defining what the requirements are needed. So as they come along and we just adopt those, we'll be, you know, hopefully as other organisations adopt that and work with that, we will all be talking the same language.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, when you were running through that, one of the things that prompted, as I say, I've been talking with quite a few of the different surveying companies. Multivista have got quite an interesting for scanning and using AI to pick up where penetration seals are. I don't know if anybody's tried that at all, but it looked pretty cool. It could be, I think, a good thing to be able to use. Is anybody aware of that?
No, I'm not, but I'd be interested to see what that looks like. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's anyway, good. Okay. I was then going to just talk about BS 8644 if anybody's interested in that. Dave, where are you on that journey? Oh, I've just noticed Isan's joined us. Isan, we were talking earlier about how people are approaching doing the fire safety plans for the 23rd of January deadline. You're from Guinness, I think, aren't you?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
How many in-scope buildings have you got?
We have 36 currently, but with the need for the 11 meter situation, I don't know where we are in terms of our building safety team going to be looking at that as we do with our current ones, or do we just keep it as the 36? So we have 36 at the moment, but we have developments obviously in the pipeline, which will then bring it to a lot more. And from a development perspective, we have another 17 which are going to be considered as in scope.
Cool. Okay.
It's 17 schemes. Not that doesn't say that's going to be 17 blocks. It's going to be, it could be 17 schemes with 4 blocks in each of them. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, right. We can pick up, maybe you and I can pick up afterwards. I can explain to you what we're doing on the basic floor plan side of things, because
yeah, sure.
We're trying to establish a bit of a collaboration around that so that we can define a set of requirements. Good. Okay. Dave, do you want to talk about BS 8644, or do you want me to kick in and explain what it's about?
Kick in. I mean, from our perspective, a bit like every other document that comes out. I mean, our first sort of thing that we do is basically do an organisational gap analysis against the requirements. So that that could be technological gaps, it could be resource gaps, skills gaps, organisational hierarchy gaps. And we've taken that approach for all of them, for the Building Safety Act, Fire Safety Act, Residence Charter, White Paper, you name it. And what we do find is there's often an overlap in those documents where we've identified the same, resources or skills gaps, etc., or process gaps, or technical gaps. So that's as far as we've got at the moment. We're doing that gap analysis. So
yeah. Or indeed contradictions.
Yes, yeah, you do often get that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so just to explain, if is everybody aware of what BS 8644 is, or shall I just explain that briefly? Sounds that. Just put your hand up if you're not. But okay, that's good. I think I've shared before what the draft version of this, but I say it was draft. It was only draft. I think the standard is pretty much based on this. So this is basically designed, but it's sort of shaped around the COBie schema. So what we've got here, bear with me a second. For anybody that's familiar with COBie, you'll recognize these sheets. In terms of the what's required, then the information about contacts. So what they've done is they've added on to each of the existing COBie data sets some additional information. So if you see down here, you've got competencies on there, which is something that wasn't there before. At the building level, I don't know whether they've changed anything at that level. Certainly on a floor level, you've got here 4 new attributes against the floors. You've then got some new attributes against spaces. against zones, types, don't think they've added anything against instances, which we think actually is a bit of a shortcoming, because there are things that you probably would need to know about the individual instance. We've also got something here as we're going down. Don't think they've changed anything on connection, which not very many people use anyway. They've added things on spares, I think. We've actually gone through and done an analysis on this, and we're putting these into the data templates now. You've got here resource names. The big change is that they've added some new tabs in. So they've added a tab in for packages, which is new. Competence, which is new. And what they've also done, they've produced a set of additional attributes here, things like electrical power backup type and things like that. So, but these aren't prescriptive, they're suggested safety properties. So the principal idea here is that the client who in this world is determining what everybody should be doing, is this information should be added into the asset information requirements. So one of the challenges with this, there's quite a lot of, let's say, industry engagement, people quite strongly talking against it, because people are feeling from a workflow perspective, they're expecting all of this to go into models, because the way a lot of people are producing COBie is from the model using IFC, and there are no definitions. There are no definitions and also no placeholders in the 3D model to accommodate that. But in our view, that doesn't really matter. If this is information that the fire people have said they need, then it's really a matter of delivering it. So the approach that we've taken, these are all new attributes that have been added. So the approach that we're taking is to simply add those in, take existing COBie, and then add them in as attributes, and then add new tables. So that means that rather than people having to produce two separate data sets or two separate work streams, they can both come from the same data. So that's so I'm expecting that we're going to have this cracked by, this is active plan, by the way, rather than BIM4Housing, but by the end of this week, we're expecting to have this cracked so that we can generate the fiery data directly from the system. And therefore, once we do that, it means that we can then populate whatever software application people need that competency information in. Does that help? A matter really of looking at this from the, but my concern at the moment is that the BIM community is coming at this from the point of view of what they can do with their existing processes, whereas the Anand and the people that have actually pulled this together, they're saying what do they need as fire engineers? What do they need as you know, from a fire safety, or from an organisation? Because I think Alan used to be a fireman, so they're actually coming at it from their side, and my view is that we shouldn't be letting the technology that we're using be the barrier to providing the information that's needed. So that's the approach that we're taking. Does anybody have any questions on that? Do you see that responding to what is in that standard? I mean, given the fact you've got hundreds of other standards that you've got to accommodate, but do you see it as being relevant to, you know, for example, you as operations teams? I feel very lonely here. Can somebody answer me?
I was going to say on Sovereign's point of view, I think it would be great. I'm just in many of these presentations, I'm made aware of how far we've got to go and how many people internally we've got to garner and sell the vision of time investment in this too. And yeah, we're already on a journey with that, and it just seems to increase every time I look at something. So I don't know if anyone else feels like that.
Certainly do, Steve.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, it's I mean, I've been told that there's 30, I think it's 30 new regulations that are coming out off the back of the Building Safety Act. We've not even seen them yet. So it's frustrating because people seem to take a view that once they've produced a document or a paper or a piece of guidance, then it's done, without thinking about how people are actually going to deal with it. Yeah, so I think that's where we have to come together and say, okay, this is what you're asking for, but this is what we're practically able to deliver. It's not a matter of theoretical, because as I think Jack was saying earlier, if the regulator comes and looks at what Clarion are doing, and he can see or she can see what progress is being made, then, you know, arguably they should be satisfied with that. Whereas, you know, it's better to be on the journey, isn't it? I think the approach that we're taking as well, and, you know, again, sorry to put my active plan hat on, but the way we're looking at it is that if somebody's got, you know, 20, 50, 100 blocks, then it's a matter of doing something on all of them, not waiting until you can do something the perfect on everything. So it's a matter of prioritizing them, but also being able to do something pretty basic. And one of the things that we're looking at the moment, we've done work over the last 18 months or so on the COVID testing centres, and we had to mobilise those within a few weeks. And we had to do almost 200 sites within 4 weeks. But we did that just by doing the people that were visiting the sites. This is in the middle of COVID, so you couldn't travel very easily. They just had hand sketches, and they used those as containers, placeholders, for putting the information that they could collect, and then they could then build on it. So I think that's a logical way of approaching it, even if you've just got a very simple, almost like a matrix of you know, what the layout of the internal flats are, just as a placeholder. And then you can, with 360 cameras now, you can record some pretty, you know, very cheap ways of pulling together asset information. And then you can then look at it, coming at it from the other end, the work that Jack's doing at the moment, where you're doing proper scans and you know, creating models from that. And my point is that we can come at it from both angles, and then you end up with something that, you know, you can work with. And also it means that we can align it with the the documents. I don't know if you've, I think some of you have seen the stuff that we did in the Golden Thread initiative to actually identify what documents are needed and what information is needed to support the safety case. So you can start to use it to gather together the information that you need. So I think it's a matter of doing it in a structured and progressive way. Good. Okay. Right. Well, I think I've probably covered what I had on my agenda. Is there anything anybody else wants to contribute or ask? Have you found it helpful? That's good. That's what I like to hear. Good. Okay. If that's the case, there's no point in carrying on for the sake of it. So if we wind up now, and I'll also, if anybody's interested in the the little work stream that we're doing on the floor plans, then just drop us an email and we'll include you on the next session. Good. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers.
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 Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye.
Speak to you later, Kelly.